think that's something that like influenced you, or like as in was it an external thing that made you like music, or was it something that came from within?
You know what? Honestly, I feel like the things that I was going through growing up, and the outlet that I was presented with to write about how I felt. So writing became this method of expression,
Mm.
which then I linked with music, which became, hip hop. So going through life, I feel like music was always part of me. But honestly, when I got older, I'm gonna like a few years ago, I found out that my grandfather was a musician
Mm.
and he was a percussionist. And the more that I learned about him, the more that I understood perhaps why I was drawn to percussion or jazz or those sounds from then. It was a really interesting point of my life. Like, oh, I get it now. And maybe perhaps music has always been this kind of space or outlet within my family lineage, perhaps. But yeah, I was always drawn to music. I
Mm.
was always drawn to it.
Did you, because I know you grew up in a foster home, did you
Mhm.
know your grandfather? Like, is that something that you guys spoke about together? Is this something you learned later?
It's something I learned later. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to meet my grandfather. He died some years ago. And being that I was in foster care and kind of separated from my family, I didn't really get to know much about them.
Mm.
I was 14 months old when me, my sister, and my brother were separated from my mother. My mother, a beautiful woman, I look just like her, very intelligent. I learned a lot about her and her talents and her skills. But unfortunately, that beautiful woman had voids in her life that she filled with substance abuse. And so we were separated from her due to neglect and placed into foster care. And a couple of years later, when I was 3, I lost my mother from an overdose. And we were in foster care from the time I was 14 months old until our foster mother chose to adopt us when I was 7. Growing up, I really didn't know much about my biological family. I was around them here and there, visitations and things like that, but not truly an opportunity to get to know who they were.
Mm.
And as I got older, I worked hard to try to take that journey of discovery, which allowed me to discover that no, my mom wasn't this negative figure that I would hear so much about. My mom was a beautiful, intelligent,
Mm.
intuitive, smart, educated woman who had some issues that she tried to cover up with substance abuse. So, and then my family, unfortunately, a lot of my family dealt with addiction.
I absolutely love just the heart that you have towards your mum and speaking about your mum,
Yeah.
because I know it must have been, well, it must have been just so hard. So how do you feel like you dealt with that? Like dealt with firstly, um, growing up not really being close and knowing your biological mum. What was that like for you?
Um, Growing up, it was difficult. But at the same time, like my adoptive mother is a very strong woman, very independent. She was in her 50s when she adopted us, so she was already kind of older. She had already raised 3 women, and she had about 30 youth that went in and out of her home she fostered. And so we came from a household where, you move on, move forward. We really didn't talk about the loss of our mother. It was just, toughen up, go for it. And that, in a sense, there's pros and cons to that, which I started to understand as an older person, that there was pros and cons to this whole ideology of be strong and you went through this, but suck it up and, that kind of thing. So growing up, we didn't harbor on the loss of our mother. We really just kind of, moved on. But I had some behavioral problems because there was something going on the inside that I just didn't understand because I never took the time to say, hey, I lost my mother. That hurts. I just kind of went through and nobody like sat down with me. We went through counseling and things like that, but it was still difficult because I didn't really face the issues internally. But yeah, it was difficult growing up without my biological mother and also my biological father. Honestly, growing up, my sister and my brother, they had the same father and I didn't, but I didn't know that. And the the father that I thought was my father would visit us and a nice man, but just not in a position to be able to take us in. And when he passed away from a heart attack, that is when I found out that that wasn't my father. So I was about 7 years old.
Wow.
And that also rocked my world. So just growing up, imagining a kid facing these difficulties, facing these hardships, not understanding how to work through these emotions. So it was really difficult growing up. In that circumstance. It was a daily fight within myself trying to figure out like why am I acting out. But it felt good to act out. It was scary. I was afraid of what people would think. Growing up, we kind of were raised to be strong. You don't cry. No, that's weakness.
Tick tock, follow pendulums. Hip hop, you don't need a pen. Matter of fact, go on and hand me your medulla. Who your ruler, who the coolest? Follow trends, foolish you is the shoe fits. Hand in your rent, deposit your soul. Bid